Have you ever felt completely invisible, as if the world looks right through you? Today's story is about a woman who used that invisibility as a shield. She was a janitor, a ghost in the hallways of a powerful corporation. But when a crisis erupted in the CEO's office, this ghost was forced to speak. Her words would not only save the company, but also unravel a dark and dangerous past she had desperately tried to escape. Prepare yourself for a story so intense, you'll question everything you think you know about the people you see every day. Our story begins with Maya, a woman who had erased her own identity. For 2 long years, her world had been reduced to the scent of disinfectant and the squeak of a mop on polished floors. She worked for a massive Chicago construction firm, but no one knew her name. They saw a blue uniform, a headscarf pulled low, and rubber gloves that never seemed to come off. She was a shadow, intentionally fading into the background. Her silence was a fortress, built to protect her from a past filled with unimaginable wealth, a devastating betrayal, and a threat that was still very much alive. A past that was about to collide violently with her carefully constructed present. The late afternoon sun slanted through the panoramic windows of the penthouse office, casting long shadows across the Italian leather chairs. Ethan Cole, the firm's CEO, slammed his hand on the mahogany desk, the sound echoing the panic in the room. His face was a mask of controlled fury. "What do you mean he's in the hospital?" he demanded, his voice low and dangerous. Marcus Vance, his deputy and oldest friend, ran a hand through his already dishevelled hair. "A burst ulcer, Ethan. He's going into emergency surgery as we speak. Our Mandarin translator is out of commission." The air crackled with tension. Outside, the city of Chicago hummed with life, oblivious to the multi-billion-dollar deal that was currently flatlining 50 floors above its streets. The delegation from Shanghai was arriving in less than 12 hours, and their primary language was not a suggestion. It was a requirement. Without a world-class translator, they were finished. "This is a catastrophe, Marcus." Ethan paced the length of the office, a caged tiger in a bespoke suit. "This isn't just a deal, it's the future of the company. 2 years of groundwork, negotiations, and flying back and forth to Shanghai, all for it to end because of a poorly timed medical emergency." He stopped and stared out at the sprawling city below. Try finding a synchronous translator for high-level technical Mandarin overnight. It's impossible. This isn't something you can run through a damn app. Marcus slumped into a chair, defeated. "I've called every agency in the city. The best are already booked. The ones who are available, well, you wouldn't trust them to order takeout, let alone negotiate the finer points of a skyscraper contract." The silence that followed was heavy, filled with the sound of a ticking clock and the death of a dream. They were about to lose everything. In the corner of the vast office, a figure moved almost silently. It was Maya, the janitor. To them, she was just part of the furniture, a silent functionary in a drab blue uniform. She emptied the wastebasket, her movements economical and quiet, her eyes fixed on the floor. She could smell the expensive cologne the men wore, a scent of power and confidence that felt like it was from another lifetime. She heard every word of their frantic conversation, and each syllable was a painful reminder of the world she had abandoned. For 2 years she had perfected the art of being invisible. She had kept her head down, her mouth shut, and her secrets locked away. But as their desperation reached its peak, a conflict raged within her. To remain a ghost was to stay safe. To speak up was to risk everything. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the quiet hum of the building's ventilation system. She straightened up from her cleaning cart, the plastic squeaking softly in the silent room. Both men turned, startled, as if a statue had suddenly come to life. They had completely forgotten she was there. "Excuse me," she said, her voice raspy from a disuse. It was clear and steady, cutting through the thick tension. Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Yes? Can we help you? Or could you please give us a moment? We're in the middle of a serious conversation." Marcus looked at her with open annoyance. He saw a nuisance, an interruption. He didn't see the woman beneath the uniform. Maya took a small, hesitant breath, her gaze meeting Ethan's directly for the first time. "I heard you need a Mandarin translator," she said, her voice gaining a sliver of confidence. I speak fluently. I can help." The statement hung in the air, so preposterous, so utterly out of place, that for a moment neither man knew how to react. Marcus was the first to recover, letting out a short, incredulous laugh. "You!" he scoffed, looking her up and down, from her worn-out shoes to the scarf covering her hair. "You're the janitor. This isn't a high school language club. We're talking about a billion-dollar negotiation with one of China's largest conglomerates. It's absurd." His words were sharp, designed to dismiss and humiliate. Maya flinched but held her ground, her hands tightening on the handle of her cart. Ethan, however, didn't laugh. He looked at her, truly looked at her, for the first time. He saw the intelligence in her eyes, the lack of fear despite his deputy's condescending tone. He was a man drowning, and she had just thrown him a line. It might be a thread, it might be a hallucination, but he was desperate enough to grab it. "Wait, Marcus," he said, his voice quiet. "Let's not be so quick to dismiss it." "Are you serious, Ethan?" Marcus protested, standing up. "You're actually considering this? Look at her. It's a joke." But Ethan ignored him, his focus entirely on Maya. "You're certain you can handle this? It's synchronous translation of complex, technical terms. One mistake could cost us everything." Maya's posture seemed to shift. A hint of the person she used to be surfaced. "I understand the stakes, Mr. Cole," she replied, her voice now devoid of hesitation. "I have a degree in international business and linguistics. My Mandarin is not just fluent, it is flawless. Test me." The challenge was unmistakable. For a woman who had spent 2 years trying to be invisible, it was a staggering gamble. In that moment, she wasn't the janitor. She was a professional making a claim, and she was daring him to call her bluff. The fate of the company and her own hidden life now rested on what he would do next. Ethan stared at her for a long moment, the gears turning in his mind. The situation was insane, but what choice did he have? He nodded slowly, a decision made. "All right, we'll test you." He strode back to his desk and picked up his phone, his thumb flying across the screen. Marcus threw his hands up in exasperation and stalked over to the window, turning his back on the scene. "I can't believe this," he muttered under his breath. Ethan spoke into the phone. "David, it's Ethan Cole. Yes, I know it's late in Shanghai. I have an emergency. I need you to speak with someone for me. In Mandarin. Assess their proficiency. It's critical." He listened for a moment, then looked at Maya, who stood waiting, her expression unreadable. He held out the expensive smartphone. "Here, this is David Chen, our head of operations in Shanghai. Don't disappoint me." For a second, he thought she might refuse, but she simply nodded and reached for the phone. As Maya reached for the phone, she methodically pulled off one of her yellow rubber gloves. The simple act was transformative. The hand that emerged was not the coarse, weathered hand of a labourer. It was slender and pale, with long, delicate fingers and perfectly shaped nails. Though they were unpolished and cut short, her hands looked like they belonged to a pianist or a surgeon, not a janitor. A fine, elegant wrist was revealed as the sleeve of her uniform pulled back slightly. Marcus, who had turned back from the window out of sheer disbelief, noticed it too. His cynical expression flickered with surprise. This woman was a collection of contradictions: the drab uniform, the hidden face, and now the hands of an aristocrat. She took the phone from Ethan, her touch light, and brought it to her ear. She was no longer just a cleaning lady. She was a complete and utter mystery. "Wei, Nin Hao, Chen Xiansheng," Maya began, and the sound that filled the office was stunning. Her voice, which had been quiet and slightly hesitant in English, was now a fluid, melodic river of perfect Mandarin. There was no trace of an accent, no searching for words. She spoke with the easy cadence of a native, her tones rising and falling with practiced grace. Ethan and Marcus stood frozen, listening to a one-sided conversation that was completely beyond their comprehension. She laughed softly at something David Chen said on the other end, then responded with a complex, multi-clause sentence, her expression animated. She gestured with her free hand as she spoke, a natural, unconscious movement. The janitor had vanished. In her place stood a poised, articulate woman who was completely in her element, navigating a high-level conversation as if it were the most natural thing in the world. The shift was so profound it felt like a magic trick. The conversation continued for several minutes. Ethan could only guess at the content, but he could hear the increasing warmth and respect in Maya's tone. Then, in a moment that would forever be seared into his memory, her expression softened. She looked out the window at the twilight sky and recited a short verse in Mandarin. The words were ancient, poetic, and filled with a quiet beauty that transcended the language barrier. Even without understanding, Ethan felt the power of the language, the depth of culture from which it sprang. It wasn't just fluency, it was mastery. It was the kind of thing you couldn't learn from a textbook. After a few more moments, she smiled, said a polite farewell, and ended the call. She turned and handed the phone back to Ethan, her face calm, the mask of the janitor slipping back into place, but not quite fitting anymore. The silence in the room was absolute. Ethan took the phone, his eyes never leaving her face. A moment later, it buzzed with an incoming text from David Chen. He glanced down at the screen. The message was short and to the point. Ethan, I don't know who this woman is, but her Mandarin is better than mine. Her accent is perfect Beijing standard, and she just quoted Tang Dynasty poetry to me. If you don't hire her for this, you're an idiot. Where did you find her? Ethan read the message twice, then looked up at Maya, a slow smile spreading across his face. He felt a surge of adrenaline, the thrill of a wild gamble that was about to pay off. He then looked at Marcus, whose jaw was practically on the floor, his face a perfect picture of astonishment and confusion. The absurdity of the situation was suddenly replaced by a sense of surreal possibility. Their impossible problem had just been solved by the most unlikely person in the entire building. Well then, Ethan said, breaking the silence, it seems we have our translator. He turned his full attention to Maya. The dynamic in the room had irrevocably shifted. The meeting is at 9 a.m. tomorrow. We need to prepare. He paused, looking at her uniform. But first, we need to address your wardrobe. That won't do. Marcus finally found his voice. Ethan, wait. We don't know anything about her. Who is she? Where did she come from? This is a huge security risk. Ethan waved off the concern. Right now, Marcus, she is the only thing standing between us and complete failure. We'll deal with the security questions later. He looked at Maya. My name is Ethan Cole. And you are. For the first time, she offered her name. Maya, she said softly. Just Maya. He nodded. All right, Maya. Your cleaning duties are over for the day. You're with me. We have some shopping to do. He grabbed his suit jacket and headed for the door, expecting her to follow. Maya hesitated for a fraction of a second, then nodded. She walked over to the utility closet to change. A few minutes later, she emerged and both men were taken aback by the change. Without the bulky uniform and the headscarf, she was a different person entirely. She was slender, with a graceful posture that her janitor's slouch had completely hidden. Her dark hair was pulled back into a simple, neat ponytail, revealing a face with high cheekbones and intelligent, watchful eyes. She was wearing simple jeans and a plain grey sweater, clothes that were as anonymous as her uniform, but couldn't hide her natural elegance. For 2 years she had been a spectre in their hallways, and now suddenly she was a person who was about to be thrust from the shadows into the brightest of spotlights. Seeing her like this, Ethan's feeling of risk was slowly being replaced by a deep, burning curiosity. The ride down in the private elevator was silent and tense. Maya stood perfectly still, staring at her reflection in the polished steel walls, a stranger looking back at her. When they emerged into the underground garage, Ethan led her to a sleek black Audi. The smell of new leather filled the air as he held the passenger door open for her. It was a gesture of professional courtesy, yet it felt deeply strange. For years she had been invisible, and now she was being treated like a VIP. As the car slid silently into the evening traffic of downtown Chicago, the city lights blurred into streaks of colour. She watched the magnificent buildings of the Magnificent Mile glide past, places she used to know so well. Every landmark was a ghost, a memory of a life she had been forced to bury. She felt a knot of anxiety tighten in her stomach. This was a world she had fled, and now her boss was dragging her right back into it. They pulled up in front of a luxury boutique on Oak Street, a temple of high fashion, where the price of a single scarf could pay her rent for 6 months. The moment they stepped inside, a sales associate with a practiced smile and dismissive eyes scanned Maya's simple clothes and immediately wrote her off. She turned her attention to Ethan. "Good evening, sir. How may I help you?" she purred, ignoring Maya completely. Ethan's expression hardened. "We need a full business outfit for my associate," he said, his voice clipped, gesturing toward Maya. "A suit, blouse, shoes, everything. And we need your best stylist. Now." The associate's smile faltered as she finally registered his tone and the authority radiating from him. Her professional demeanour snapped back into place. "Of course, sir. Right this way." She led Maya toward a plush-fitting area, the sudden shift in attitude making Maya feel even more like an imposter in a life that was no longer her own. Inside the spacious, softly lit fitting room, Maya was surrounded by mirrors. The stylist brought in armfuls of expensive clothes, hanging them on the rack with practiced efficiency. Left alone, Maya stared at her reflection. The woman looking back was a pale, tired version of the girl she used to be, a ghost in a grey sweater. How long had it been since she had worn anything but second-hand clothes and a work uniform? How long had she been hiding from herself? She reached out and touched the cool, smooth silk of a blouse. The fabric felt alien against her fingertips. A wave of grief washed over her, so powerful it almost buckled her knees. Grief for her father, for the life that had been stolen, for the person she had been forced to become. A single tear escaped and traced a path down her cheek. She quickly wiped it away as the stylist knocked on the door, her voice artificially cheerful. "How are we doing in there?" One by one, the stylist presented outfits to Ethan, who sat in a leather armchair, his expression growing more impatient with each option. He rejected a black pantsuit as too severe, a navy dress as too plain. He shook his head at everything. "Is this the best you can do?" He finally snapped, his voice sharp with frustration. "Your employee seems to have a complete lack of taste. Find me someone else, or we'll take our business to a boutique that understands what power dressing means." The comment, though not directed at her, made Maya feel small. The store manager, alerted by the commotion, hurried over, his face a mask of apology. He quickly dismissed the flustered stylist and took personal charge. He listened intently as Ethan described what he wanted: elegant, authoritative, modern. The manager nodded, his eyes scanning Maya's frame with a professional's gaze before he disappeared into the racks. The manager returned with a single, perfectly chosen outfit, a tailored suit in a deep charcoal grey with a subtle pinstripe, its skirt cut to a sophisticated narrow silhouette. He paired it with a silk blouse the colour of brushed steel. He handed the pieces to Maya in the dressing room. When she emerged a few minutes later, the transformation was breathtaking. Ethan stood up, his critical expression finally melting into one of genuine approval. The suit fit her as if it were custom-made, accentuating her graceful posture and giving her an air of quiet authority. The silvery blouse shimmered under the boutique's lights, catching the colour of her intelligent eyes. She looked in the mirror and barely recognised herself. The ghost was gone. In her place stood a confident, powerful woman, a woman she hadn't seen in 2 years. It was both terrifying and exhilarating. "Finally," Ethan said with a satisfied nod. "That's what I was looking for." Height. As Maya stood before the mirror, the manager knelt before her, offering a pair of classic leather pumps with a modest heel. She slipped them on, completing the ensemble. She looked like a CEO, a partner, an equal. As she turned, she caught a glimpse of the price tag dangling from the suit jacket's sleeve. Her breath caught in her throat. The price of the suit alone was more than she earned in 3 months of grueling work. Panic flared in her chest. This was a fortune she could never repay. Ethan noticed her expression. He walked over, smoothly plucked the tag from the sleeve, and handed it to the manager without looking at it. He gave her a reassuring look. "Don't worry about it," he said quietly, his voice low enough for only her to hear. "Consider it a necessary business expense. Tomorrow you are the face of this company. We can't afford for you to look anything less than perfect." The next morning, the boardroom buzzed with a nervous energy. The delegation from Shanghai sat on one side of the long table, their expressions polite but unreadable. On the other side sat Ethan, Marcus, and their team. Between them sat Maya. She was the picture of calm professionalism in her new suit. She had spent the night in a hotel room Ethan had booked for her, studying the technical specifications of the project until dawn. When the introductions began, she translated seamlessly, her voice confident and clear. She didn't just translate their words, she translated their intent, their cultural nuances. She picked up on a subtle joke from the lead negotiator and relayed it with perfect comedic timing, breaking the initial tension in the room. Marcus watched her, his earlier skepticism replaced by sheer awe. She wasn't just a translator, she was a diplomat, a bridge between two vastly different worlds. The negotiations were intense, lasting for hours. At a critical point, the deal nearly faltered over a complex liability clause. The language was dense, the legal implications enormous. Maya listened intently, then offered a suggestion directly to Ethan. "They are concerned about long-term structural integrity guarantees," she whispered. "It's a matter of professional honour for their chief engineer. Perhaps we can propose a joint, third-party inspection protocol every 10 years. It shows confidence and partnership." Ethan took her advice. He presented the idea, and Maya translated it with precision and tact. The head of the Chinese delegation listened, nodded slowly, and then spoke to his team. After a brief discussion, he smiled. The tension evaporated. By the end of the day, the contract was signed. As they shook hands, the lead negotiator bowed slightly to Maya. "Your company is very fortunate," he said in Mandarin. Her insight was as valuable as her voice. Back in Ethan's office, the mood was electric. Champagne was poured. Marcus raised his glass to Maya. "I was a fool," he admitted freely. "You were incredible. You saved us." Ethan smiled, his relief palpable. "He's right. I'm promoting you, effective immediately. Head of our new East Asia division. Name your salary." It was a life-changing offer, a ticket out of the shadows, but Maya's smile was strained. A flicker of her old fear returned. "Thank you, Mr. Cole," she said. I'm honoured. But there's a problem." Ethan put his glass down. "What is it?" She took a deep breath. "My documents, my passport, my social security card, my diplomas, they were all stolen a couple of years ago. I've been trying to get them replaced, but it's a very slow bureaucratic process." The excuse sounded weak even to her own ears, a flimsy wall against a tide of questions she couldn't answer. Ethan's brow furrowed. "Stolen? All of them? That's not a problem. I'll have our corporate security team handle it. They can expedite anything. We'll need your full legal name, date of birth, whatever you can remember, and they'll sort it out." He meant it as a helpful offer, but to Maya, it was a threat. The colour drained from her face. "No, please," she said, a little too quickly. "It's fine. I can handle it myself. It's just complicated." Her evasiveness hung in the air, a sour note in the otherwise celebratory mood. She was visibly agitated, her eyes darting toward the door as if looking for an escape. The fortress of silence she had built for 2 years was crumbling, and she was terrified of what lay buried in the ruins. She saw the suspicion bloom in Marcus's eyes and the new questioning look in Ethan's. Her secret was no longer safe. Later that evening, after Maya had left, Marcus cornered Ethan in his office. "You see that? Something is seriously wrong," he insisted, his voice low. No ID, no papers, perfect Mandarin, quotes poetry, and she was working as a janitor. It doesn't add up, Ethan. Think about it. She could be a corporate spy, planted by a competitor to get inside our biggest deal. The paranoia was plausible. They were in a cutthroat business, and industrial espionage was a real threat. She knew exactly what to say to close that deal. Maybe a little too well, Marcus continued, planting the seeds of doubt. She's a ghost, a highly skilled ghost, and you just offered her a key to the kingdom. You need to find out who she really is before you sign any employment contract. Ethan hated to admit it, but Marcus was right. The contradictions were too glaring to ignore. The risk was too high. The next morning, Ethan called his head of security into his office. Paul was a tall, broad-shouldered man in his late 30s, a former detective with a quiet, observant demeanour that missed nothing. He was intensely loyal and incredibly discreet. Paul, I have a sensitive matter, Ethan began, closing the office door. We have a new employee, or a potential one. Her name is Maya. That's the only name she's given us. He explained the entire bizarre situation. The janitor, the flawless translation, the missing documents, her strange refusal of help. I need you to find out who she is, Ethan concluded. Be discreet. I don't want to spook her if she's just someone in a tough spot. But if she's a threat, I need to know. Dig into everything. Financial records, education, family. Find out why a woman like that would be mopping our floors. Paul listened without interruption, his expression unreadable. I'll get it done, boss, he said simply, and left. 2 days later, Paul knocked on Ethan's office door. He was holding a thick file, and the look on his face was one he had never seen before, a mixture of shock, gravity, and something akin to pity. He closed the door firmly behind him. You'd better sit down for this, Ethan, he said, his voice unusually sombre. What did you find, Paul? Is she a spy? Ethan asked, his stomach clenching. Paul shook his head. No, nothing like that. He opened the folder and laid a photograph on the desk. It was a society page clipping from a few years ago, showing a beaming, vibrant young woman in an elegant gown, standing next to a handsome, silver-haired man. Her name isn't just Maya, Paul said, tapping the photo. Her name is Maya Hayes, and the man next to her is her father, the late billionaire industrialist Richard Hayes. Ethan stared at the photo, his mind struggling to connect the glamorous heiress with the quiet janitor. Paul's report laid out the whole tragic story. Richard Hayes had been a titan of industry, a man who built an empire from scratch. After his beloved first wife died, he was consumed by grief until he met Isabella, a beautiful woman who bore a striking resemblance to his late wife. He fell for her completely, unaware that she was a cunning grifter. After they married, Isabella systematically isolated Richard from his daughter, Maya. She convinced him to send Maya to a prestigious boarding school and then university in London, all under the guise of giving her the best education. Meanwhile, she and her secret lover were slowly siphoning funds from Richard's companies, and worse, feeding him a cocktail of drugs that exacerbated a minor heart condition. They were playing a long game, aiming to inherit his entire fortune. The file was filled with bank records, medical reports, and private investigator notes. The story grew darker. Richard eventually overheard a conversation between Isabella and her son, Daniel, and realised the depths of her betrayal. He was shattered. He immediately contacted his lawyers to start divorce proceedings and write Isabella out of his will, making Maya his sole heir once again. But he never made it home from the hospital. His heart finally gave out, weakened by the substances his wife had been secretly giving him. When Maya flew back from London for the funeral, Isabella, feigning the role of a grieving widow, told her she had been disinherited and barred her from the family home. That night, Isabella arranged for Maya's luggage, containing all her documents and money, to be stolen from her hotel. Then she sent an accomplice to the room to silence her for good. Maya barely escaped with her life, terrified and with nothing to her name. With no proof and no one to turn to, she did the only thing she could. She disappeared. For 2 years, the brilliant, educated heiress Maya Hayes had been living as Maya the janitor, hiding in plain sight, terrified that Isabella's reach would eventually find her. She worked for cash, lived in a tiny room on the city's outskirts, and cut off all contact with her old life. She was a ghost, haunted by the memory of a father she loved and a stepmother who had stolen everything from her. Paul closed the folder. She wasn't lying about her papers being stolen, he said quietly. She was just leaving out the part where someone tried to murder her right after. The air in the office was thick with the weight of the story. This wasn't corporate espionage. It was a story of profound evil, a family tragedy of Shakespearean proportions. Ethan looked down at the file, at the life that had been so cruelly destroyed, and felt a cold, hard anger settle in his chest. An anger and a fierce resolve to see justice done. Ethan leaned back in his chair, processing the horrific tale. He looked at the file, then at the closed door of his office. He now understood Maya's fear, her secrecy, her reluctance to accept his help. Any move she made could alert the woman who had tried to kill her. He picked up his intercom. "Svetlana, could you please ask Maya to come to my office?" he said, his voice calm and even, betraying none of the turmoil inside him. A few minutes later, there was a soft knock. Maya entered, looking professional and composed in the suit he had bought her, but her eyes were wary. She saw the thick file sitting on his desk, and a flicker of pure terror crossed her face before she could mask it. She knew instantly that her time hiding was over. The silence stretched, thick with unspoken truths, as the CEO and the heiress disguised as a janitor faced each other across the expanse of the mahogany desk. "I know everything, Maya," Ethan said gently, pushing the file across the desk. The climax of Maya's story wasn't a boardroom negotiation, but this quiet, terrifying moment of revelation. But then came the twist she never expected. "And we are going to help you," Ethan continued, as Paul stepped back into the room. "It's time for you to go home." Armed with Paul's evidence and the company's full legal support, Maya returned to the grand estate she grew up in. The confrontation with Isabella was swift and brutal. Faced with proof of theft, fraud, and attempted murder, the grifter and her lover crumbled. They were thrown out of the house with nothing. Maya didn't just reclaim her inheritance, she reclaimed her name, her life, and her power. She brought back her beloved childhood nanny, Mrs. Peterson, filling the cold mansion with warmth once more. In the end, Maya chose not to return to the corporate world, but to use her father's foundation to help others who had been wronged. She found not revenge, but justice, and in the loyal and protective Paul, she found someone she could finally trust. Her greatest secret was not her wealth, but her resilience. Thank you so much for joining us on this incredible journey. If this story moved you, please show your support by hitting the like button, subscribing to our channel, and leaving a comment below. We love hearing your thoughts. Have you ever underestimated someone, only to be completely amazed by who they truly were?